Let me do some pictures to start with. Here we're over. This is from the material on the stuff from Matthew 14. And for Matthew 14, we start with Jesus on the western side. I'm sorry, you're not supposed to be doing that. Stop that. Causing problems, sorry. But here we are. Let's see, we're looking, it's the plain of Bethsaida, so we're on the eastern side right here. This is where the feeding of the 5,000 would have occurred. Again, these are all estimates. They make some places, there's supposed to be a church where somebody said it happened, and they're suggesting it's not there. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? But again, this is near, there was a village called Bethsaida. Remember, Bethsaida is important because who used to live there? That's actually where Simon and Andrew lived for a period of time, if you remember. And then they were starting to build it up. I wonder if it was because of the build-up, the gentrification. I don't know if that's a word they would have used there. We used to go to this place on Glen Lake, Michigan. And then we were on Big Glen Lake. There was Little Glen Lake. There's a little, well, that matter. But there was this little itty-bitty town. Was that Glen Lake, Cindy, that little bitty? We had like 5 buildings or something there originally. Whatever it was. So, and then we went back one year, and a lot of the stores were changed to be really, very expensive stores. We're going, prices were going up, and so. But anyway, one of the possibilities is the reason that Simon and his family left there was because of it actually was being built up at that time. It must have been a wonderful place. So now we're on the southern end of the plain of Bethsaida looking. So this could be the area, again, where it occurred. Notice there is green grass there. This is actually from the western side. Neha Musi is a moose on here, is to show what a crowd could look like kind of in Jesus' day. Notice all of the people, there is no space. The destination, I put this on here, when they left, well, it's interesting that we're doing this lesson today because we're still in John 6, which also talks about feeding of the 5,000 and the crossing of the sea type thing. But here is the destination. It's, depending which one you read, it was either Capernaum or closer to Gennesaret. One of those two areas in there, possibly right in between. They aren't too far apart. This just gives you some closer views of some of the areas. This is Magdala. Why is Magdala important? Somebody you know came from there? Mary Magdalene, technically you pronounce the E, come from this area. This is Chorazin. This gives you an idea of a road. This actually is in Bethsaida, some of the things they've done so people would walk on a road like this, probably in a little better shape than it is here.
It looks like the one where we were going down to the theater. Yeah. They said
and
partly wrong.
Gamla, good morning. And here's another crowd. This is actually at the Sea of Galilee. Remember Jesus on the boat preaching? Could have been like this. Notice how the crowd gathers around. Again, this is an earlier picture of crowd to give you an idea of what that could be like. Imagine listening to someone in a setting like this. Reminds me of being down in Washington, D.C., Cindy, on the 4th of July type thing, with thousands and thousands of people. Just some beggars, pictures of beggars. Here's the sunset over the Sea of Galilee. I'm finally getting there. Here is a village, how a village could have looked like back in that time. Of course, this is an older picture, thus the black and white. That's a big village. But it's a lot of gray basalt type stone and all. It's where you buy your groceries. I think I got one more before I get to the map. So what do we have here?
This was our lunch.
That's right, St. Peter's Fish.
Yeah, St. Peter's Fish.
No, but it's also called St. Peter's Fish.
Yeah.
So this would be
It
lunch.
was very bony.
Yeah.
Bread and fish,
Yeah.
which is what they ate. Show some more St. Peter's fish. Jesus commands the crowd to sit in the grass. Could have been an area like this. I'm trying to get to where I wanted to start. I'm getting closer. Oh, basket.
Now, is that the
Here we
basket for the, like, the
No,
left
that one's too
side?
big. That one's too big.
Oh.
This is showing you a picture of the whole region. You know, we have Samaria, Galilee, and so our place is right up in here where we're focusing in on. I've shown you this map before. This is supposed to be Jesus' travels. I'm sorry I couldn't get it off that map, but here we are. This is where we're going to be today. And today's someplace over in here is the feeding of the 5,000. Remember, they crossed over. It's from John 6 too, interestingly. And I put it someplace here between Gennesaret and Capernaum, because one says they landed at Capernaum, the other says Gennesaret, so I'm thinking someplace in between. So this is where we're talking about in today's lesson. We're talking about someplace out here. Remember, it's about 9 miles at its widest. So if the boat were out here, could Jesus see them? Yeah. Well, here's one of the boats they found that you can still see from that when it was really low and all. And let me go back to the map. We'll start there.
So they were even fairly protected up in that corner from big winds. They weren't out in the middle of the sea.
Depends how you translate the words.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, it could have been.
Well, if you want to give.
Someplace out in here is where they were.
Yeah.
Someplace between here and here. We don't
They
know.
weren't in the middle.
And
We
if
don't
you
know
want to
exactly.
go for Michael Card's explanation, then it would have been more reasonable to have it in the middle, but since it's up there, it must have been the devil.
They could have, depending, remember, the wind's blowing against them.
Yeah.
It is that type of sea, so they probably, if the wind's blowing here, they're probably going to get pushed up this direction.
Yeah.
Could get closer to the shore, but we don't know how. It doesn't say exactly.
Yeah.
Remember, we do not have the GPS coordinates. I don't know why we don't have those. They should have had that. You know, today we have GPS coordinates and things like that. And there'd be a floating, I'm sorry, I'm going crazy. All right, so let's officially start then. Now that everybody's here and we got time, a little time in, we'll start with a prayer then. Gracious Lord, continue to open our hearts and lives to you and help us as we ponder Simon and what he did. And of course, what Jesus did as they were walking on the water. Help us to never take our eyes off of you. We ask this in Jesus' most precious name. Amen. Giving you a couple of things. One is from Matthew 14, 22 to 33. That's our text. I pulled out the stuff that we used before, which shows you what it said in Mark's gospel, which is a little bit different. And remember, the biggest difference between the two is what's not in Mark's gospel. I don't know if you caught the title on the thing on Mark's gospel. It was entitled The Incomplete Story of the Water Walker. Why was it entitled that? What's missing?
Peter.
It does not talk about this guy. He's not saying it at all. So we're going to talk more about that. And the other interesting thing, if you look down in verse 48, this is unique in Mark's version. Let me start up with the sentence. Very early in the morning, he, that's Jesus, came toward them walking on the sea, and this is the unique part in Mark's gospel, wanted to pass them by, which is very interesting. It's as if Jesus is going to walk right on by. They're not going to know.
Like he was going to sneak by walking on the water.
No, he's saying, look over there, guys. Or, I don't know. It's just interesting. But that's unique there. It's not in any other gospel, that little aspect. You know, the unique part in Matthew's gospel is Peter walking on the water. And so the same question you could ask is, why is it here? Why isn't it any place else? What? Anytime you get to those why questions, it's a real good, you all are correct in your answers, right? Because we can't prove or disprove any. So it's interesting if you look immediately prior to this. I usually try to look at context of things. We're in chapter 14. But let me go right back to interesting thing in chapter 13. Starting in verse 53, Jesus is in Nazareth. Remember what happened to him in Nazareth. They don't believe in him. As a matter of fact, and he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief, disbelief. And then in chapter 14, we start with the death of John the Baptist. Then, of course, we come to the feeding of the 5,000. And remember, Jesus is, and I find this kind of fun because we're looking at this in Sunday's Gospels as well. Jesus is over here, having fed the 5,000. In chapter 14 of Matthew, verse 13, when Jesus heard about it, that's about the beheading of John the Baptist and all, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. That's why we're saying someplace over in here, coming this direction. And so when the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd, had compassion on them, and healed their sick. Of course, Jesus will teach them. We have nothing of that teaching as far as I know. We have the feeding of the 5,000. And then that's today's gospel lesson about the theological stuff. Stop that. Some of the things that are happening. John notes they return to Capernaum. Here in Matthew, it talks about coming in the plains of Gennesaret, which could be Capernaum in that region. And yet today we're talking about what happened on the water. So we'll jump into that. As we do, I'd like you to keep those questions about Simon in your mind. Where is Simon in his relationship with Jesus? How far is he along? You know, if he believes in Jesus all the way or something, I don't know. Okay. Okay, here's the first question I have for you. This lesson is entitled The Fearless Water Walker. Who's it about? What's the title refer to? Who's the fearless water walker?
Peter.
Is it Peter?
Well,
Started out that way.
You're right.
yeah, he didn't end up that way, but why would you say fearless for Jesus?
I didn't come up with the title. I don't know. Is it fearless? I think it's there to make you think. Who's fearless and who's not?
Okay.
Does Jesus show any fear? No.
No.
You're going to tell me that's not fair, right? But that's okay. I mean, it's interesting. The other one, the lesson from Mark, was the incomplete story of the water walker. So to me, that's more, that title refers to the guy who didn't walk on the water. So I don't know. I mean, you can look at it in two ways. You could say it's about both of them, but it's interesting that fear becomes a part of the story. Fear is there a lot in the stories, right? And I think we need to realize that. Remember, Peter was a fisherman. This is his lake. This is his area of the lake, as a matter of fact, too. This is up in his home court, if you will, because originally they lived there. Now they're living here. So this is his area. There are two storms that we hear about, right? 2 times on the lake. The first incident is a violent storm. When we did our Mark discussion, we even talked about that it was almost demonic in nature. Some of the same words that are used when Jesus tells the storm to stop. He tells it to be muzzled, literally, which are the exact same words he used on against demons. Luke mentions it's a squall, a line of violent wind, thunder, and lightning, a violent storm. And this is storm 2. How is this storm different? Is it as dangerous? Did you read what it says? Look at verse 24. So what does it say about the disciples who are in the boat on the way?
Battered by the waves and the wind was against them.
And what are they doing? Are they making headway? They are making some headway, right? But it's hard. They are working really, really hard. So it's a bad storm, but is it a deadly storm like the other one? It's nowhere near the amount of deadliness.
Yeah.
I guess that worked. So it's different in its scope, I think. They are straining against the oars. Mark tells us the wind is against them. But the major difference, I don't think, is the weather, although that's a minor difference. What's the biggest difference in the 2 storms? It's easy.
Jesus wasn't in the boat with them.
The difference is Jesus.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? In the first one, what happens? Jesus is asleep in the stern. Don't you care about us? We're going to die. You know, Jesus doesn't go, I don't care. But he gets up and calms everything, right? He doesn't say, I don't care. But here, he's not in the boat. That's a little difference. And I think that's important to keep. So, we'll go through, as is our tendency, verse by verse. Hope we can get through. We should be able to do. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. Notice the word immediately. It is the same word that Mark uses. In John's Gospel, he uses different words, but this is the exact same word. And he compels. That's what I get from made. He's getting them out of there. Why is Jesus getting them out of there? Why does Jesus want the disciples gone? You ever thought about that? In John's Gospel, I mentioned it on the sermon today, the crowd wanted to do what?
Make him king.
They wanted to make him king by force.
Yeah.
So they were going to come and put him in. Jesus gets, trying to say this politely, lets the disciples leave so they're not caught up in this yet. Because what do they know about it? Where are they in their relationship with Jesus? How far along are they? Could they be swayed by the crowd to make Jesus king to continue to provide daily bread? I think yes. So Jesus, I keep wanting to say gets rid of them, but that's not the way. He sends them off. He's sending them back over here where he's going to meet up with them. They're assuming, I guess, he's going to walk around, because they could do that something. Go ahead.
Verse 22, he made them get in the boat.
Yep.
That's a little stronger than he sent them away.
Well, the word, I think the best translation would be the word compel.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at compel, force,
Yeah,
press them,
yeah,
whichever. He compelled them. He said, you're going. And they left.
Yeah.
I mean, when Jesus talks, people usually obey, right?
Yep.
So he does that. He does that, and yeah. And so they go ahead of him to the other side. The other side is also an interesting word. A different location relative to oneself, separated by the intervening space. I don't know, maybe I'm making too much, so going over here. They seem to go back and forth a lot up in this area especially. Okay, there was one other thing. Got that. Okay, verse 23. After dismissing the crowds, he went up on the mountains by himself to pray. Well into the night, he was there alone. And so Jesus is up on a mountain by himself. Why do you think he does that?
He needed a break. To get away, to meditate, to pray.
Yeah.
It's hard to be alone if you're Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sorry, Tim, were you?
No, listening to your statement, hard to be alone. Not sure I understand what context.
Hard to get away from people.
Oh, yes, yeah, but not to be, I think he became energized by being alone with his father.
And I think the aloneness would be from people, but not from his Father God,
Right.
which is the other distinction. It's not really made clear in the text, but we see that so often that I think we could do that. I have a picture. That doesn't help that too at all. I wanted to get to that. Let's see. Here we go. So this is one of the mountains right by the plain of Bethesda where they could have Bethesda. So if I'm up on this mountain, I can see all the way to the other side. The picture doesn't show it exactly, but if I were a little farther, I could see all the way. So Jesus could see them out on, even though it's at night, Jesus could see them. Did Jesus have supervision too?
Of course.
I never thought about that. Sorry, it's probably going weird. Something like that.
Maybe not the vision, but the light. He's so light that he lights everything up.
Hey, he could walk through walls.
I'm sorry?
He could walk through walls and did.
Yeah.
He could disappear off cliffs. He could do anything. So of course he did.
He could see.
He had any
So he can see
superpower
them.
you
He had
could-
GPS.
Verse 24, meanwhile, the boat was already some distance from land, battered by the waves because the wind was against them. Okay, this is when it starts to get intense. Some distance is an interesting translation to me. Excuse me. If you look on the section there It's made up of two words. Stadion polos is how it would be written. Stadion is, that's what's translated some distance. You'll notice it is a unit of measurement equal to 600 Greek feet. Didn't know, I'm sorry, when I was doing it going, so Greeks are walking 1, 2, 3. That was really bad. Which is technically, in our measurement, 12.125 inches. So it would be 606.75 feet is one stadion. It says some, it is a plural. We don't know exactly how many. Polis means many, great type thing. I was reading in one of the, Gibbs is one of the guys, he's not the guy on TV that has that name. Jeffrey Gibbs was a prophet at St. Louis Seminary. He wrote a commentary on this, and he suggests it was possibly several miles, that they've been out there some time, because remember, Jesus sends them off, and now it's late in the evening. What time is it anyway? Do you know what time it is? We see that in verse 25. The
Fourth watch.
very early in the morning, I thought that was, I didn't like that, so I put the literal thing. In the fourth watch of the night. When is the fourth watch of the night? Did you guys, you had the Coast Guard, you had fourth night. Would there be a fourth watch?
We had 6 4-hour watches. So we only had 3 watches through the night,
Okay,
technically.
so technically you guys were different from this.
is-
This would be between 3 and 6, if I remember correctly.
That's
So
what,
it's between 3 and 6 in the morning. So it's been some time that they've gone. They're straining against the wind by oars and all. We don't know exactly how far they've gone, but they have gone some distance. Many of these, many would be more than one, it would be at least 2. That would be 1,200 feet. Many would be probably many more than that. I don't know how many. It doesn't say. Again, we don't have GPS coordinates. I'm sorry, I'm up on the mountain now. I want to get back to the sea. So it could be some way away. As it's getting dark, you could be able to see something out there. Interesting. Verse 25. Jesus came toward them walking on the sea very early, between 3 and 6 a.m. I don't know. How would you respond if you saw somebody walking towards you between 3 and 6 a.m.? And you're out in the open sea, you've been working on the lake, you've been pulling hard against the oars, you're getting tired, the wind is against you, the waves are against you. Would you be frightened?
clean your glasses.
Depends how close you are to the water, to the shores,
I'd
right?
assume it was a hallucination, I'm sure I would.
They said it's a ghost. Notice this word for ghost, it's kind of fun. Phantasma.
Uh-huh.
A phantom, an apparition, a ghost. And they cried out. Notice that they are terrified in verse 26. Not just scared, terrified. Seems to be very scared, right? Very, very, very scared. I don't know how many varies to put there, but quite a bit scared. And they have this phobos, fear. We talk about phobias, so that's where we get our word from too as well. Notice it's often they have fears. It's a common thing the disciples have. So they're terrified. It's a ghost. Fear. Mr. Jim?
Yes, what is meant by ghost? Is it a disembodied soul? Is it a demon? Because I thought, the Jewish thought that after you're dead, you sleep with your ancestors. You don't get up and start.
Don't hang around and walk.
So
I don't know. Notice what it says there for ghost. This is the sense. Apparition, a supernatural being that has become visible but not material. So if it's a supernatural being, it could be someone more like someone that plays on the other team on the devil's side.
But
I don't know. That's what first of all, is it a ghost? No. They're trying to make sense out of what they see. When you can't make sense out of something, if you can label it, it gives you some fear. Did they believe in ghosts and spirits? Yes. I think it was maybe not a common, but it was not an uncommon thing in that time frame.
Well, what comes to mind is Saul.
So what's it, Endor?
Yeah, Saul bringing Samuel back, and Samuel doesn't want to be back.
Yeah, that's a very odd story to me.
Yeah.
And leave me alone, right? I think they're trying to figure out what is this type thing. There are three things I think that are key in that one. Notice it. In verse 20, yeah. They're terrified, it's a ghost, and fear. What happens in the next verse? Jesus says three things. Number one, what's the first thing Jesus says?
Have courage,
Have courage. Number two,
don't be afraid.
oh, you missed one.
It is I.
It is I, and don't be afraid. So what were they? They were terrified. What is Jesus' response? Have courage. They are afraid it's a ghost. What does Jesus say?
No,
It is I. And what the third one? They cried out in fear.
Don't be
Jesus
afraid.
says, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
So each specific point Jesus responds to. Did you catch that before? Each one he talks about and tries to allay their fear and their concern. I think that's fascinating. To me, I never had noted that before. When I look at it, I go, when did we see that? Yes, ma'am.
The use of the word ghost in this setting is the same word that's used when Peter gets out of prison, shows up at the door, knocks, and the girl slams the door in his face and says it's Peter's ghost. Would that be the same word?
Probably, but I did not look at it, so I don't know for sure. I don't have a way to look right now.
Okay.
I don't know. That would be a standard word for ghost
Okay.
in that setting, so, yeah.
I wonder if it was just a general term of, since you
Yeah.
weren't expecting Jesus to be there and Rhoda wasn't expecting Peter
Yes.
to be there, maybe you just say it's a ghost, and maybe they weren't thinking of any theological or, religious
Good point.
implication, that's just sort of a general term for if it's not what you thought it would be, or you weren't expecting him, then it must be a ghost.
Well, they're trying to put a name on
Right.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
and if you can name something,
Yeah.
sometimes takes some of the fear away, but I don't think it did. Tim?
What struck me was that Peter says, Lord, if it is you, and as opposed to, is it you, Lord?
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. That's in verse 28. Yep.
Because he's rejecting what Jesus just
Oh,
said.
don't get us, you're going a little fast.
Oh,
We have a
yeah.
couple things to do yet before we go there. Sorry. Interesting, and we'll still stay on verse 26 and 27. In verse 26, notice there's no fear expressed until what happens? By the disciples, there's no fear expressed in our reading until what happens.
They saw
They see
Jesus.
the ghost.
So is it the storm that scares them?
No.
No.
This
No.
is different from that other one, right? It was the
Right.
Yeah,
storm
right,
that
yeah.
frightened them. So here, they're not frightened of the storm. They are working through it, not easily, granted, but they're working through it. And that's not the problem. The problem, quote unquote, is when Jesus, according to Mark, starts to pass on by. I don't know. It's interesting that Matthew does not express it that way. But Matthew has Jesus right there as well, type thing. Let's see. Didn't want to miss that because I thought we were going past that. Fear only when they see Jesus. That was a big one. Oh, I got the three statements, right, of the three fears and the three. So terrified ghost, cried out in fear, have courage as I. Yeah, we did that one. Make sure we don't miss that. This is fun. Don't be afraid. We could translate it, stop being afraid. Because they were being afraid. Jesus is trying to get them to stop their behavior. There's no need to be afraid because why? It is I. Now, some people want to do the it is I and say this is, using divine name or something there. I'm not sure that that's, it's the Old Testament, ego. I don't think it's that type thing. I think it's really a response to the previous, it's a ghost. Jesus is saying, no, it's not, it's me. And so there's no need to be of fear. Have courage instead. It's me, don't be afraid. And then I think is when we come to the real meat of why we're looking at this. Of course, we're trying to think about Simon Peter and all, and you'll notice that our dear friend Matthew continues to call him Peter. That's interesting to me. Lord, if it's you, Peter answered him, command me to come to you on the water. Notice the question, if it is you.
Right?
Is it you or not? If I were a phantasm, I could say, come on, right? I don't know, I said,
Well,
but if it's you,
every time I think, and probably wrong, you'll find it, you scholars, but in the Bible, when an angel or something from the Lord shows up, they say, fear not. I don't think the demons do that.
I believe you're correct.
So, every time they show up, they say, fear not, because they have a message and they don't want you cowering in the corner. They want you to listen to what they have to say. So, it's interesting that they were still wondering what it was.
What's interesting to me about it's, if it's you, if you go back to the other one, Jesus had said to them, how is it that you have no faith? He didn't want to hear those words again, if it is you, instead. So he's trying to have a little faith. And it's interesting that Jesus calls him. Now I'm jumping ahead. Oh, you of little faith, which is an interesting phrase. That's over in verse 31. Little faith. Not no faith, but little faith. Now, if it were me, I'd probably have less than little faith in that setting. Would you have enough gumption if Jesus says to you, come?
Well, they've seen Jesus before, and they should know that some of his tricks.
Tricks?
Well,
Shouldn't do are two different
He had
things.
GPS, they didn't. He could do stuff that they couldn't do, and they'd seen some of that.
But notice it's interesting. Does Peter get out and walk before Jesus tells him to?
No.
So he asks
He wants
Jesus.
permission.
So he does understand that there's something Jesus does have there. That's true. And it's only after Jesus says come that he comes.
He's
It's
getting
only in
impatient.
response to Jesus' call, which I think is fascinating. I'm sorry?
I said, Jesus is getting impatient with him after he's shown him all these signs and wonders and miraculous healings and the fish and the loaves and all that. And still you're questioning whether he...
Well, that's the whole point of John's entire chapter, chapter 6, dealing with the feeding of the 5,000. He zips right through this incident. I think it's the short of all four Gospels. I guess I'd have to count words, but it's pretty short. And he goes to the meaning behind, and you don't understand, he's telling the crowds, and I think he's telling the disciples too. You don't get it too. Next week in the gospel lesson, it's that part of, where some of the disciples, when Jesus said he's the bread of life, they're going to leave. And Jesus asked them, do you wish to leave too, to the 12? No, Lord, you have the words of eternal life. To whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. I'm going to throw in the hallelujah because I've sung it too many times. But that's what it goes there, right? So
I think
there is
they
that question
Yeah.
on them still at this time. Except, well, we're getting ahead of ourselves again. What's the last thing that happens in this narrative? What do they do? Did you catch that? Verse 35.
They worshiped him,
As what? What does it say?
the Son of God, the true Son.
Oh, that's pretty big stuff.
Yep.
I think that's going to be the first time you see that. If you find one before that, let me know, and we'll double check and go, sorry, I forgot that one. That's like you're saying fear, right? Only don't be afraid. It's the same thing.
I've always found it interesting that he asked him to command him. It's almost like he thinks this can happen, but if he says, well, why don't you come, or invites instead of commands, it's almost like Peter knows he needs a command to have enough courage to do it.
He needs Jesus to tell him what to do.
To do, right.
Peter does what Jesus tells him to do. I think I can make that statement pretty much through everything, right? I think especially after this event, Peter's going to do that.
Sounds like Peter wanted to do it, but he still wasn't
But
sure.
he
if
would not
if
do
he
it
could.
without
Right.
Jesus' command to do so.
Yeah.
Cindy?
He recognized that he couldn't do it on his own. He needs God to be able to help him
Huh?
to do that.
So what did he do? This is verse 29. We already looked at come. And climbing out of the boat. It's an interesting word, climbing out of, come down. So he's coming down out of the boat, which implies he has to go over it to come down. And you'll find out that in the other one, when they got up, in verse 32, they got into the boat. Technically, it's they got up into the boat. So they come down into the sea, come up into the boat. Just it's a little nautical stuff. You said, okay, is that fair enough? I think. Interesting. And climbing down out of the boat, Peter started walking on the water and came towards Jesus. Everything's wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Now, the fascinating thing is, how far was Jesus from him? Gibbs wants to say that based on the words that are used and the tenses and all, that Jesus is right there at the boat. Now, it doesn't specifically say that, but Gibbs is a pretty smart guy, so I'm not going to say he's wrong because he's smarter than I am in all this stuff with Greek and everything. I'm just a little infant in such things, but he's pretty good at that. And so his emphasis is Jesus is right there. And so when Jesus he doesn't have to run across the water to pull Peter up. Peter climbs out of the boat and not very fast, boom, he starts to go down and such things. Here's my question for you. What sort of person wants to walk on the water in the middle of a dark windstorm? What does it tell you about Peter? This is, on this time, you can't be wrong because it's what you think. That's the best type of question, right? What type of person does that? What does it tell you about Peter?
He's an impetuous sensation seeker.
Impulsive.
Impulsive?
He doesn't think before he acts.
That's right.
Tim has that.
I believe when he stepped out there, he believed he was going to walk on the water.
And he did.
He did.
Isn't it interesting? What does it say? Did he want to walk on the water just so he could be with Jesus?
Yeah.
He often does the wrong thing for the right reason. You ever notice that? He's beginning here. It's kind of a strange way it's said. To understand it's only the call of Jesus that will make the impossibility of walking on the water possible. It's only because of that. And I read this quote, I forget who gave it to me, about what Bonhoeffer says. Bonhoeffer says that discipleship is never an offer we make to Christ. It is only the call of Jesus that makes everything possible. Now think about that. Discipleship is never an offer we make to Christ. It is only the call of Jesus that makes everything possible. Peter could not walk on the water on his own. It's only the call of Jesus to come that makes it possible for Peter to walk. And so then we could ask, all of us sometimes ask to do things that we don't have faith to do.
You know what it makes me question, that children's song, I have decided to follow Jesus, like I decided.
Yeah.
But he called you and he gives you a choice to come or not to come. But the quote that you just
I believe that I cannot by my own reason and strength believe in Jesus Christ my Lord to come to,
no.
but the Holy Spirit.
Brought me by the gospel.
So, we go that way. I think sometimes what we miss is that Peter's walk was indeed a triumph of faith until
Yeah.
he took his eyes off Jesus. But
Yeah.
and it's really kind of a miracle, if you will, because of what Jesus did. But then life changes. I like that. Started walking on the water. I like that translation. Verse 30. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. So what was the problem? He saw. He looked. He looked around, instead of keeping his eyes on Jesus. The wind's strong, the waves are high, all of this, he became, there's the word again, fearful, afraid, phobio. His focus off Jesus, the humanness of the man came out. He became afraid of the situation. He began to seek. In the midst of the new reality, if you will, he was able to walk on water. That he stepped into it started to unravel because he had doubt. You think about it, he had no proof. I guess he had Jesus walking on the water. Did he have proof that he could walk on the water? He had hope. He had faith.
Yes.
But when he saw the waves, he began to need the proof that the impossible he was doing could somehow be possible. And beginning to sink is interesting to me. I'm plagued with that word. You know, to sink, what does that mean? Beginning to sink.
Go
How far down is he? Did you look at what the word means? To sink is, I put the stuff there. To sink. Katapantizo. Notice the first meaning. Drown. Sink. The sense is to drown. To die from being submerged in water, getting water into the lungs, and asphyxiating. None of that sounds like fun to me. So beginning to sink means he's going down, down, down. And to me, it means he's not, treading water or whatever type thing. And let me get to this. I did not, none of these pictures are mine, obviously. Hello, wake up, wake up, wake up. Really? Sorry, I'll be coming back here.
Here you go.
Here we go. We got Jesus walking on the water. Are you going to work now? Great.
Great.
And so here is the reenactment of Jesus walking on the water. He's on the stone. I don't know if you can see it. He's pretty close to the edge. So he's walking on the water. And here's Jesus. I'm sorry, this is Peter in the water. I don't know. And Jesus is going to pull him up. I don't know. To me, I think he's farther in. It's pretty calm there too, right? Somebody tried to do that, but there's a little better. He's down pretty far.
I saw a great picture where he was
I
actually
like that painting a
underwater.
little bit better. Sorry, went too far. I will leave it there.
Well, see, to us, sink and drown are two different words.
Yeah.
Sink just means to go down.
To start
Yeah.
down.
You can say, I'm
Drown,
sinking, it just means slowly going down. Drowning means dying. So, but if it's the same word in Greek, then I guess, right. So anyway, sinking
So I
and
think
drowning.
what's important is he's not like on the picture there where he's this far above and he's starting to go down. I think it means he's a little farther. Again, I didn't put the picture here. I could have done it, but it's not technically legal for me to do, so I didn't choose to do it, especially since we're broadcasting live. I don't want somebody to give me a copyright violation thing.
Right.
But look for that picture of there's a wonderful painting where Peter's all the way under
Yes.
the water.
And you
And
see
there's
a
the hand of
Yeah, I love
Jesus
that.
coming down into the water
Yeah.
to pull him up. When I picture the scene, that's what I see. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but to me, this is a little better than the last picture because you'll notice they're trying to get there. There's only, I guess there are 2 oars. They're not going to be getting very far with those 2 oars, though. And that Peter's going down. So I don't know. He's going down and Jesus reaches out. Cindy.
One thing that I'm curious about is after Jesus' death and resurrection, they're out on the water, they see Jesus on the shore, Peter jumps out and swims to shore. So I'm wondering if Peter knew how to swim, and yet because he starts questioning things, he can't even swim at this point. He's going down.
When they're fishing, they're possibly closer to the shore
Yeah.
than here, possibly farther. I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting point.
Living here in the Eastern Shore, I remember when I came here, hearing about all the fishermen down here who have drowned, because most fishermen didn't know how to swim around here, and I always wondered that about the other ones. I mean, why would they swim? That's,
It's hard to swim in a storm like this.
well, that's true.
And it's hard to swim fully clothed.
That's right. That's right.
And he's fully clothed here, isn't he? In this game.
Well,
He even got a hat on.
Does this show that the doctrine of once saved always saved isn't a viable doctrine.
I'm not sure this shows that.
Pardon?
I'm not sure this one shows that. I'm not sure that's this. It is interesting. The word save is the same word that is used for Jesus saving us from sin and all of that. That is that word. It's the same word. You know, save me from dying physically. It's the same word that's used for spiritual, all of that stuff. It's the exact same word. So what does Jesus do? How does Jesus respond to Peter's cry?
Reach out
Reach out.
immediately.
Immediately.
First word is what?
Immediately.
Did Jesus go, well, I don't know, Peter, you're not showing enough faith in me. Now let me let you go a little farther down immediately. If I remember right, it is the first word in the sentence in Greek too, trying to emphasize it. Immediately. Jesus, he reaches down, stretches down to him. I like caught hold. He catches him. Jesus caught him. That's kind of fun. Grasped him. He's safe because Jesus has saved him. You of little faith, why did you doubt? Well, the first thing I'd respond is, I don't know if you did that. Maybe spit out some water if you were actually underneath.
It bothers me a little bit, and it always has. Why did you doubt? I could never answer that question. If I didn't have faith in you for something or other, and then you came through with it, and you said to me, why'd you doubt? I couldn't answer it.
I think the next key in this text. Okay. Yeah, let's go right over this. I think that this is what I wrote down. I think this is the next key in this text. How did Simon Peter respond when he became fearfully aware of his surroundings? He gets out of the boat, comes down to the boat. He's looking to Jesus, walking towards Jesus on the water. I would go, whoa, right? I don't know. And what does he do? Takes his eyes off Jesus as he's looking around. He starts to go down. What's the next thing he does? Before he cries out, I suggest he refocuses on Jesus. Is that fair?
Yes.
Am I putting too much there, you think? I think he refocuses on Jesus. I'm sorry if I'm going to cry to Jesus. Jesus is over here. I'm not going to do, Lord, save me if I can. I'm going to be looking at him, crying out in fear directly toward him. And if what Gibbs suggests is correct, the boat's right here, Peter is right beside it too, still can't climb on. But Jesus reaches down. Jesus is right there and able to immediately reach out and pull him up, catch hold of him, and restore him to safety. You of little faith. Little faith is interesting. I never knew this. So thank you for this class to make me look this up. It is a specific word. Oligopistos. Pistos, you should remember, maybe if you don't, that's faith, but it's talking of little faith. This is not the only time it is used. It is used only in Matthew. Are you going to work for me or are you not going to work? Hey, look at that. Here we go. This is from Matthew chapter 6, verse 30. Sorry, you can't see it. It's cutting me down. If that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and thrown into the furnace tomorrow, won't he do much more for you? You of same word. It's one word. It is not pistos plus another word talking about a small amount, but it's a specific word. This one is from the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is talking about your anxiety and not to be afraid. So that's one place. Here's the next one, chapter 8, verse 26. Jesus calms the first storm. Jesus said to them, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was great calm. You notice he says little faith, not no faith or unfaith or disbelief, but you of little faith. There's a little bit there, maybe a little mustard seed of faith that's been working. This one you should catch, right? Where's this from?
This,
Right here.
It's right here. Yeah. Just checking to see if you're awake. Yeah, that's this one. Yeah, okay. You're on, oh no. And here we are. We are in chapter 16, verse 8. Jesus' response to the disciples' unbelief. Remember, this is right when Jesus is about ready to, well, no, sorry. Aware of this, Jesus said, "You have little faith. Why are you discussing among yourselves?" Oh, that's right. This is after all the feedings. "Why are you discussing among yourselves? You do not have bread. Don't you understand yet? Don't you remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you collected? How many had they collected? Do you remember? 12, right? 12 of the small baskets, one for each disciple, the apostle. Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000. How many large baskets you collected? 5, right? 5 big baskets, band-sized baskets. Why is it you don't understand when I told you, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? It wasn't about bread. Little faith, still little faith. That's my last on little faith. But it's really a fascinating thing. I hadn't known that was one word. I found it interesting. This is what Dr. Gibbs wrote. When Jesus uses this term, he is always rebuking those who are little faiths. However, the result never is that he rejects those who are his little faith disciples. However weak or small their faith may be, they remain his followers and believers in him. Little faiths are not the same as unbelievers. Little faiths. Did you doubt is fun. Did you doubt is also used in Matthew 28:17. Where are we in Jesus' life in Matthew 28:17? What happens like in verse 18 through 20?
the Great Commission.
Therefore go, right?
Yep.
So Jesus is risen. He's there. It's fun. When they saw him, they worshiped, the same word that we're going to run into here in this text in verse 33. But what else was there? But some doubted. The same thing. Why did you doubt? Why do you have this doubt in you? To lack confidence, wavering. I like that, wavering. Why is Peter doubting here? Why did he doubt? Deeper lesson, maybe, is here. What has Peter experienced thus far? Let's just do this chapter. Jesus fed all of these people. How much did he have? 5
loaves and 2 fish.
2 fish. How did he do it? He took the bread, blessed it, looked up to heaven to bless it, broke it, distributed it, gave it to the disciples to distribute. Did the same thing with the fish. We don't know when the multiplication occurred. It does not say, right? It's when Jesus is blessing, he keeps having stuff to distribute there, or is it when he gives a little bit to the 12, each 12, and they keep giving out, and they're going, I'm still out. We don't know. It's not, he doesn't have it up his sleeve, right? It doesn't just keep coming out type thing like magicians do. But somehow it happens. Cindy is telling me she's got something to say. I have to pay attention, so I'll be having a lunch.
Well, I find myself just like Peter, in that when some big trouble comes my way or something, I might begin to doubt, because, and I can sit there and go, well, God has done this, and this. He's always helped me in the past, but I also recognize he might not help me this time in the way that I want him to.
And that's the key part, in the way that I want to.
Because even like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they say, we will not bow down. We know that our God can save us, but even if he doesn't.
Yeah.
So you recognize the fact that he's God, and he may have a different plan than what you're wanting it to be. So, I mean.
But in our sinful nature to be doubtful, because we don't have that omnipotence yet, you know? So I think that's who we are until you reflect on past experience and even, and then if people say to you, well, he didn't save Jerry. I go, yes, he did. He died, but I know where he is. So it's not like what you want, it's what he wants. And then
Your first reaction is, oh no, I can't do this, or this can't be. And he says, wait a minute, remember what I did here, remember what I did here, and remember the whole Jewish history when they celebrate Passover. Remember what the Lord did to save us from the Egyptians, and remember this, and they remembered it, and we remember it, but when it happens, it's just human nature.
well, and those
to
things,
doubt and to be afraid.
they knew so many evil spirits, and they knew so many odd things, and so many thoughts that were related to idols and weird things and people. So I mean, that was their first thing. They're coming from all this stuff, you know.
But the other thing is, I think in my own case, my little faith is, I absolutely do not doubt that Jesus can do it. I may doubt, however, that he will bother to do it for me.
Right.
When you were all having that discussion, I was thinking of something, so I looked it up. I'm in Mark chapter 9, where this guy has come to Jesus. He has a son this is the son that foams in the mouth, grinds his teeth, becomes rigid. The disciples can't throw out the demon. Jesus says, you unbelieving generation, and all. How long has this been happening? Blah, 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 blah. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Jesus said to him, if you can, everything is possible for the one who believes. Immediately, yes, there's the fun word again, the father of the boy cried out. Remember what he cried out? I do believe, help my unbelief, my little faith.
Yeah.
So I think we could put that with Peter here.
Yeah.
I do believe, help my little faith. Let me read from Michael Cart. This comes from the book. Jim, do you have the book? You have the book, right? You show him the cover of the book again. It comes from him. We just borrow some of the stuff from it. That's the book. It's Michael Cart's book on this Fragile Stone, right? Just show the book. Just hold it up. That's the book. It comes from that book. This is a quote from that. The lesson is that Peter needed to sink in order to take the next step of faith in Jesus. What do you think? Oh, I don't like that. Because walking on the water does not ultimately increase our faith. Only sinking does. Those who ask for miracles and receive them soon forget. But those who suffer for Christ's sake never forget. They have their own wounds to remind them. When we are hurting, we do not flee to the rich and healthy for wisdom and feel comfort. We seek out those who have fellowshiped in the sufferings of Jesus.
Wow.
It's only in sinking. Believe that? Wow.
Yes.
Those
Yes.
who have experienced.
You can think about everybody in this room has a time when it's a matter of control. You cannot control what's going to happen. And you're worried. You know, you're up on the end of the diving board. You want to dive off, but it's so far down, you check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could give you some stories about flying airplanes and being in boats. That,
Right.
you know, when you don't have control, that's when your faith can increase or you can check it out.
Well, and don't they say that for alcoholics and drug addicts, you almost have to go down to the bottom before you start coming back out?
So Peter needs to go to the bottom of the sea.
Yeah. Before you come back out.
Don't know how deep it is there, so I
He
don't have
goes a few
soundings
times.
either. Verse 32. When they got up into the boat, I put the word up there, we should be up, the climbing up into the boat, the wind ceased. Notice that he does not say Jesus caused the wind to cease.
Right.
Now we're assuming Jesus did. We don't know. Okay, but it just says that. Then those in the boat worshipped him. And I think this is about the first time we have them worshiping Jesus. Let me see. Is it the first time I'm trying to see if I took that note? I wanted to take that note. No, didn't have that note down. Truly, most definitely, you are the Son of God. Why at this point? Feeding of the 5,000. That's a pretty big deal. Peter was walking, Jesus is walking on the water, and Jesus saves him. There's a lot of little faith that maybe is becoming a little bit more right. But still, there's going to be that unbelief expressed and doubts expressed. It's a movement. It's a slow process. How far is Peter? Wow, Peter had an amazing experience, right?
Yeah.
Jesus did this. Look, Jesus saved me. He's coming around, but he still has a long ways to go. We're all coming around. Do we still have a long ways to go? To not be little faith. That's an interesting word. Little faith people.
Yeah, I think that one thing that might contribute to their worshiping in here, I was thinking about this, being in a boat on a rough sea, whether or not the wind stops, getting from in the water to into the boat, not on shore, but in the middle of the water, is a miracle in itself. So not only did he save him from drowning, but Peter was able to get back into the boat. So they saw this firsthand, and they know if you define a miracle as going against the rules of common knowledge, then this was a real miracle.
I have one last question. So why is it in Matthew? Why isn't it in Mark? Quote, Peter's gospel, unquote. Is Peter embarrassed? That's one possibility. Is Peter humble? Because he did walk on the water. Why wouldn't Peter want the story told in the gospel, which was his? Can I put that in quote marks? You know, that Mark was supposed to write it down. It's an interesting question. There is no definitive answer. Again, this is the best type of question because you can't be wrong on this one. Some people might disagree with you, and that's okay. I think, it's just me, it's up to you, I think that maybe he left it out not because he sank, but because he walked. Yeah. And he didn't want to be bragging. I don't know. I could be totally wrong. That's just my thought. So if I'm going to jump on one side, I'm going to jump on that side. I think Peter left enough stuff in there of doing stupid things and being doing things before he thought. I think you were talking about that before. He did enough of that I don't think that would have bothered him to put it in that way. Yeah. But I think it was because he walked. He didn't want to show off in that way. But I can be totally wrong. I don't know. Don't know. It's you. I think Peter's a lot like you and me. He's probably written up so much because he's real. He has ups and downs. He has times when he believes, when faith is strong, and other times when it goes whoosh, and Peter starts to sink to the bottom. And I think that based on the discussion we've had thus far in today's session, that I think most of you would agree with that. At least that's what I was hearing. That's who we are. Would you have gotten out of the boat if Jesus said, "Come"? Come. I guess I should back that up. Would you have asked, would you have made the statement, if it is you, or I guess that's the question, tell me to come walk on the water? Now that, in and of itself, expresses faith, does it not?
Yeah.
But then the second is the leap of faith. Indiana Jones, and is it The Last Crusade? Is that the one where they're searching for the Holy Grail? Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
They come to the point in the movie where Indiana Jones has to get to the Holy Grail, which you know is not what it is. It's made up movie and all. But there's a lovely spot because over there is where he has to get, and over here is where he is. And there's this great open space. And the clues say to basically take a step or leap of faith. And so his father is dying because the bad guy has shot him. Because they believe if you drink from the Holy Grail, you'll live forever or something like that, whatever. And so he's got through the first two, Oh, he figured those out. And now, how do you walk from here to there? Would you take that step? His father is dying, and so he takes a step. And lo and behold, there's a hidden kind of passage that goes across that they can't see, and so he gets the dust, and then we can say, oh yeah, it's kind of rickety. I couldn't walk across it anyway because it's so far down that I would be scared I would fall off type thing. But that's what it is. It's taking a step of faith. Peter took the step of faith. And as long as he kept his eyes focused, maybe it's a thing to ponder this week about taking those steps of faith and keeping your eyes focused on Jesus. I think that's key for Peter's story. And the more he was able to keep focused on Jesus, the less he became Little Faith. Wouldn't that be a terrible nickname? Hey, Little Faith, come here. Oh, you have to remind me all the time. I don't know, Carol had something to say.
There's an apocryphal Jewish story that Jews tell, in which the Red Sea doesn't part at all until the first Jew puts his foot in it.
So they had to be brave and courageous.
That's right. Until you
before
do that, I'm not doing it.
You with a little faith, huh? We're closing with a prayer because we're overtime, right? We pray. Gracious Lord, help us not to be little faith, but to keep our eyes focused on you. We ask it in Jesus' most precious name. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen.